Hi everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. In today's case, we're going down under and covering our first ever case from Australia. As of this video, I believe we've only covered cases from the UK and USA, so it's a change to look at cases from other countries too. I'm always looking to cover cases from more areas, so if you have any suggestions for cases you'd like to see me cover, definitely let me know in the comments. As always, today's case was recorded live over on Twitch, so if you'd like to see more of me, I would definitely suggest giving me a follow over there, where you'll be able to catch me live several times a week. Before we get into today's case, I'm just going to give my usual disclaimers. This video contains topics which may be distressing to some viewers. These topics include SA, murder, cannibalism, and abuse of a corpse. There may be further topics included which I've missed here, so viewer discretion is advised. We're going to be covering a lot of heavy topics today, so if that's something you don't think would be suitable for you at this moment, please feel free to click off the video, and hopefully I can see you again when we're discussing a topic which might be more suitable for you. I would also like to quickly mention that all of the information we will be talking about today has come from research which I have conducted through sources which are readily available on the internet. No disrespect is intended with this presentation in any way. It's all for educational purposes only. I try to get all of the information correct to the best of my ability, but I do apologise if there's any mistakes at all. Once again in this case, I feel like there were so many failures by public services, and I truly believe a lot of the actions that occurred could have been prevented and a life could even have been saved if the correct thing was just done from the start. So with that being said, let's get into today's case. So today's case is about Katherine Mary Knight, and Katherine was born on the 24th of October 1955 alongside a twin sister who was named Joy. They were born in a town called Aberdeen, which is in New South Wales in Australia. Katherine was born to parents Barbara Rowan and Ken Knight, although this definitely wasn't your average secure family upbringing. Katherine's mother was actually married to and had 4 other children with a man named Jack Rowan before starting her secret love affair with his best friend and co-worker Ken, who we mentioned before was Katherine's biological father. When her husband and the rest of the neighbourhood found out about Barbara's affair with Ken, they were forced to move out of Aberdeen to a town called Moray, with Barbara leaving all 4 of her sons behind to start a new life together with Ken. Barbara and Ken had a total of 4 children together before her ex-husband Jack Rowan passed away in 1959. And this forced 2 of their sons to move back in with Barbara, and obviously that was with Ken and the other 4 children. So this resulted in Katherine being one of 8 children that were in total born to her mother. Sadly, even this home life wasn't a happy one, with Katherine's father regularly essaying her mother, Barbara, with some reports stating that this essay occurred up to 10 times a day. Because of this, it's said that Barbara would often confide in her daughters the details of her sex life and how much she actually disliked men. Katherine has also reported later in life that when she was a child, she was sadly SA'd by a number of family members up until the age of 11, with some reports saying these abusers were possibly 2 of her brothers. She also stated that none of the SA was ever from her father though as well. These claims of SA have also said to be confirmed by other members of the family, so it always makes me wonder, like, why was nothing done back then? Why was Katherine just left to be SA'd by family members if people knew about it? Maybe I read into it wrong and they confirmed it later in life, but that doesn't make sense because they're saying that they had, if it's confirmed, if they've confirmed it, then they must have known about it at the time. So I don't know. It just seems like, why was nothing done if this young girl was getting essayed by her family members? In 1969, when Katherine was approximately 14 years old, the family moved back to Aberdeen where Katherine attended Muswellbrook High School. It was reported that Katherine was a loner at school due to obtaining a reputation of being a bully, especially to younger children. It seems like Katherine's personality was extremely unpredictable. She was often reported to have violent outbursts, and one time during one of these violent outbursts, she actually assaulted a boy at school with a weapon. But other times when she wasn't acting out in a fit of rage, she was reported to be a model student. So it seems like her behaviours just really flip. It's like a complete 180. Like, she can either be a really violent, horrible child, and then she'll just flip and be this role model student. But although she was said to be a model student when she wanted to be, Katherine left school at 15 years old and she was still unable to read or write. After leaving school, she acquired a job in a clothing factory cutting fabric, but she quit this job a year later in order to pursue a career cutting up meat in an abattoir, and this was stated to be her dream job. It did seem like Katherine actually really thrived in this career, as she was quickly promoted, and this resulted in her obtaining her very own set of butcher's knives. But strangely, Catherine was known to hang these knives above her bed, and she said this was because she wanted them to be easily accessible if she ever needed them. In 1973, at approximately 18 years old, Catherine met David Stanford Kellett when he began working at the abattoir after being fired from his previous job at the railway. He was fired due to his deteriorating behaviour and work performances, which stemmed from witnessing a colleague's death, as well as a crash which resulted in the deaths of 6 children. This trauma also resulted in him beginning to drink heavily, which seemed to make him quite angry, resulting in him often getting into fights. And during these fights, Catherine was said to back him up in a physical manner, which I believe was by getting involved in the fights herself too. They quickly became a couple and got married in 1974, so that was a minimum of a year later. They got married really quickly. And it's said that David actually turned up to the wedding completely drunk. Before the wedding, it's said that Catherine's mother Barbara had warned David, stating, quote, "You better watch this one or she'll fucking kill you." Not great things to start off the marriage with. The wedding night didn't end well either, with Catherine attempting to strangle David after he fell asleep when Catherine still wanted to have further sexual relations with him. By no surprise, the marriage was quite a violent one, with a lot of arguing and physical fights, particularly being initiated by Catherine. One time whilst pregnant, Catherine had attacked David by hitting him over the head with a frying pan and burning all of his clothes. And this was because he had arrived home late after taking part in a darts competition. So she seems to get angry over like the slightest, most insignificant things, but like really angry on a level that's just not normal. Like it's not normal to get so angry that you burn all of someone's clothes and hit them over the head. Like that's crazy. David actually suffered from a badly fractured skull due to this attack and wanted to press charges initially, but Catherine somehow managed to sweet talk him into dropping all of the charges, so it was never actually reported. Luckily, David managed to escape the abuse shortly after the birth of their first child in 1976, who was named Melissa Ann. David had run away to Queensland in May 1976, which is almost 17 hours away by car from where they had lived in Aberdeen. And this was done in order to date another woman and obviously get away from Catherine. So, all in all, the two were only married for approximately 2 years before they parted. After David ran away, Catherine was admitted to St. Elmo's Hospital due to postnatal depression. And this was because she was found violently throwing the baby from side to side in the pushchair/stroller whilst walking through town. After spending several weeks in the hospital treating her depression, she was released, but quickly went back to displaying erratic and scary behaviours. This included stealing an axe and threatening to kill people in town after she had left her newborn baby Melissa on some nearby railway tracks when a train was due to arrive. Luckily, a local homeless man had noticed baby Melissa on the railway tracks and saved her just minutes before the train actually did turn up. Once again, Catherine was taken to St. Elmo's Hospital, but for some reason, she was actually allowed to discharge herself from the hospital the following day, and no one stopped her. Of course, Catherine wasn't mentally well enough to be walking around, as she was a danger to both herself and the community. This came to light when, just a few days later, she threatened and slashed a woman's face with a knife, demanding that she drove Catherine to Queensland in order to find David. The woman obviously complied, fearing for her own life, and began to drive Catherine there out of fear. If you remember, I mentioned that this journey is almost 17 hours long by car. So obviously, at some point, they had to stop at a service station to take a break, get some food, go to the bathroom. And this is where, luckily, the woman was able to get in contact with police and get away from Catherine. So she did luckily get away, but the police did take their time to arrive, and by this point, Catherine had taken a young boy hostage at knife point. There was a struggle with the police, but they did eventually disarm her and admitted her to Morisset Psychiatric Hospital. It didn't seem like this boy was physically hurt in any way from what I could see on references and articles, but I'm sure the whole ordeal was really traumatic for him, as you can imagine. That seems absolutely horrifying. After hearing about this ordeal with Catherine, David left his girlfriend and actually moved back to Aberdeen with his mother in order to provide support for Catherine. And I found this absolutely insane because Katherine had openly admitted to police that she had planned to go and kill David and his mother. That was her plan. That's why she was going there. She was going there to kill him, and he still decided to leave his current girlfriend and come back to Katherine. Insane. After spending approximately 3 months in the psychiatric hospital, Katherine was released into the care of David and his mother, and they all moved to a city called Ipswich, which was approximately 8 hours' drive from Aberdeen, where they had previously lived. Katherine was deemed well enough to work and acquired a job in another meat processing facility. The couple had a second daughter on the 6th of March 1980, who they named Natasha Marie. And Katherine was able to live a relatively normal life, well, at least for her, until 1984, where she decided to leave David and move back to live in her hometown of Aberdeen. And when she did this, she picked up her old job again at the abattoir. She did leave this job the following year, though, after sustaining a back injury, meaning she had to go onto a disability pension. 1 year after having to leave her job, in 1986, Katherine got into a very fast-moving relationship with 38-year-old David Saunders. So this case is going to be a little bit confusing as there's two Davids so far. So I'm going to just refer to this David as his surname of Saunders. So Saunders moved in with Katherine and her two daughters just months after they met. But not unlike her prior relationships, this one was also extremely toxic. It's said that Katherine often threw Saunders out of the house as she was extremely jealous of everything that he did, just like with the previous relationship. Of course, after doing so, she would beg him to come back. Katherine's abuse escalated even further when, in order to threaten Saunders about what would happen to him if he ever cheated on her, she slit the throat of his 2-month-old puppy before knocking Saunders out by hitting him in the head with a frying pan. I didn't see anything saying whether this dog passed away or not, but I feel like it's safe to assume that the dog probably did. I don't think a puppy would be able to survive something like that. Why the dog? Why get the dog involved as well? It's horrible. Sadly, Saunders didn't leave Katherine here, and they even went on to have a daughter together who was born in June of 1988, and they named this daughter Sarah. The abuse actually only got worse, with Katherine hitting Saunders in the face with an iron before stabbing him in the abdomen with a pair of scissors after an argument. Following this, Saunders fled to his hometown out of fear for his life and went into hiding for a few months so that Katherine couldn't find him. Luckily, it seemed like his friends and family obeyed his wishes to stay hidden from Katherine, but when Saunders returned a few months later in an attempt to see his daughter, he found that Katherine had falsely filed a report to police, saying she was afraid of Saunders, which prompted them to issue an apprehended violence order against him. And from what I could find looking up, this is like a restraining order. So I think it's the same thing. And I believe this actually prevented him from being able to see his daughter. That's so sad. Like, he did absolutely nothing wrong. He was just scared for his own life. But I do feel like he should have took his daughter with him. But I've not been in that situation, so what can I can't say anything really on that, can I? Following this, Katherine had a 3-year-long relationship with a man called John Chillingworth, who was a former colleague at the abattoir. Within this relationship, they had a son together who was named Eric, but the relationship broke off after Katherine decided she would rather date her long-term affair partner, John Price. So yet again, there's two Johns, 2 Davids and 2 Johns in this case. Because the relationship with this John, the John Chillingworth, was actually uneventful. Like, there were no reports of violence or abuse during this 3-year relationship with this John. There's not much to report on this actual relationship. So, and I don't understand what caused her to be so abusive with her other partners. Nothing was reported with this John, with this partner. So I don't know, I found it really strange that this relationship was said to be quite normal compared to the other ones. John Price was a successful miner who was approximately 40 years old when he and Katherine moved in together. And this was obviously after the long affair they'd been having, whilst Katherine was in a relationship with John Chillingworth. John Price had 3 children from a prior marriage, which had ended amicably in 1988 due to what was reported as just being incompatibility. The 2 eldest children had chose to live with John, whereas the youngest child remained living with his ex-wife. It said that the children got on well with Katherine, and the couple's relationship was said to be good at the start, apart from what was reported as violent verbal arguments. But things started to go downhill after an argument they had together in 1998, when John stated he didn't want to marry Katherine. Because of this, Katherine reported to John's work that he had stolen some expired medical kits, which had actually been thrown out. This resulted in John losing his job in the mining industry, which he had held for 17 years. So he had that job for a long time, and to lose it over some expired medical kits seems really strange. Like, why do jobs do that kind of thing? He did kick her out because of this, but they got back together just a few months later, although he did refuse to allow her to live in his house with him any longer. From this point onwards, the fighting and violence only continued to escalate, when on the 27th of November of the year 2000, John fled to a friend's house after she had attempted to grab a butcher's knife during a heated argument they had had, which left him fearful for his life. The police were called for this altercation, and John reported to them what had happened. But of course Katherine denied everything to police, so nothing was done about it. It said that she even tried to claim that she was the victim in this situation, and reported bruising to a doctor just a few days later. One day after this, John confided in co-workers that on that morning, on the 28th of November, he had awoken very early to find Katherine stood at the end of the bed, with her hands behind her back, holding something which he believed to be a knife. Seeing this, he leapt out of bed in an attempt to escape, but decided not to, as he feared for his children's safety if he had left them unattended with Katherine in order for himself to escape. The next day, on the 29th of November, on his way to work, John had actually decided to stop at a nearby magistrate's court in an attempt to obtain an apprehended violence order, which I mentioned earlier, I believe is like a restraining order, and he wanted to obtain this against Katherine in the hopes that she would be prevented from entering his home. Upon arriving home from work that same day, John found that Katherine had arranged for his two children to sleep at friends' houses for the night, even though she was not at the house herself. Her own younger children had been left at her oldest daughter's house for the night too. John decided to spend the evening hanging out with some neighbours until 11 p.m, where he then returned home and went to bed. Whilst John was asleep, Katherine arrived at his home, and they proceeded to have sexual relations before John fell asleep again. And I found this quite strange because that same day he had gone to get that restraining order against her. But nothing said this, but my thought was maybe he was, Katherine had just turned up and he did it out of fear or something, but nothing said that. That was just my thought on what could have been the reason for it. Or maybe he got drunk. But like I said, he had that restraining order filed. So obviously he didn't want her near him. So I just found that a little bit strange. After John didn't arrive at work the next day on the 1st of March, concerned co-workers visited his home to ensure that he was okay, as he had told them that if he never turned up to work the next day after he had applied for the restraining order, then it's because Katherine had killed him. He truly believed that Katherine was going to kill him, and it's so sad that he was actually correct about this assumption. Co-workers claimed that they had pleaded with John not to return back to Katherine that night, but John feared for the safety of his children if he didn't return, believing that Katherine would harm them instead. Of course, he didn't know at that point that they weren't going to be staying the night. Upon arriving to John's house, they found blood on the front door, which prompted them to contact police. Police quickly arrived and broke down the back door. I assume they chose the back door because they knew the front door was definitely contaminated with possible evidence because of the blood that was found on it. When police entered the home, they found Katherine passed out after taking a large number of pills. It's likely that this was an attempt to end her own life, but she had only taken enough to just knock herself out. When searching the house, police also found plates on the kitchen table containing a full meal of meat with vegetables. Each plate had a name tag with each of John's two children's names written on it. After some investigation, it was found that the meat on those plates was actually from John's body. Katherine had cooked John's body and had made meals intended for his own children to eat. It's speculated that she had also attempted to eat John's cooked remains, but couldn't bring herself to do it, as a third meal was found thrown across the back garden. Oh, it knocks me sick. It really, really knocks me sick. I don't know how anyone could even do anything like that. So you may be wondering how it even got to this point, because that's such an insane jump to happen. But it said that once John had fallen asleep after having the sexual relations with Katherine, she had stabbed him with a butcher's knife. It said that John initially survived this attack, with evidence showing that he had managed to get away by going towards the front door, and he actually managed to get outside at one point. And throughout this, Katherine was chasing after him and stabbing him from behind as he made his way to the door. And this is why blood could be seen on the outside of the front door, like I did mention earlier. It's because he actually made it outside, but sadly he either stumbled back. What is believed to be more likely is that Katherine actually dragged him back into the house, and he sadly bled out in the hallway and passed away after suffering from a total of 37 stab wounds. And here you can actually see the police's sketch of the scene itself. So you can see that it's obviously started in the main bedroom. It's in the bottom corner there, number 1. And he made his way through there and obviously made it to the front door, which is number 4. But obviously the living room is of great interest as well. So a few hours after killing John, Katherine dragged his lifeless body into the living room where she did the unthinkable. She put her skills of butchering from her jobs in the abattoir to work by decapitating and skinning John's body with what court documents refer to as being done with considerable expertise. She hung his removed skin on a meat hook in the doorway to the lounge, which she was able to remove in one full piece. Katherine then continued her attack by removing sections of his flesh, in particular his buttocks, which she baked in the oven along with vegetables. And this is actual police footage of the scene. Obviously that you can't see anything there. From that you can see a pot, and Katherine had also boiled John's decapitated head in that large pot on the stove, which police did find during their search. Police who attended the scene have stated that this scene caused them to suffer with intense PTSD, which they are actually still receiving therapy for to this day. Like, the scene was that bad. The officers attending that will never recover. That is something you will never recover from seeing something like that. Could you imagine stumbling across something like that and just not expecting it? I found someone had taken screenshots of it, and they mentioned that it was on YouTube, like the full video. But I couldn't find that. I did try and look. I just wanted to make sure, it was, but I couldn't actually find it. But if you do want to look up, you can see some pictures of the scene. You can't see any body parts, but there's a lot of pictures of blood. I didn't put anything in this because I didn't think that it was necessary, but there are pictures like that out there. I just want to be warned if you do decide to look into it. Katherine had sadistically arranged the remainder of John's body, with his left arm draped over an empty soft drink bottle and his legs crossed. It was said during the trial that this was done as a demonstration of a lack of respect or contempt for John. The only part of his body which had not been skinned was the left side of his chest, and this was actually the part of his chest which had a scar, which was caused by Katherine when she had stabbed him at an earlier date. A handwritten bloodstained note was also found on top of a picture of John in the home, which was obviously handwritten by Katherine. This note stated that John had essayed Katherine's daughter and some other things. You can see it on screen now. It was honestly quite hard to understand what the contents of the letter really meant. You can read that for yourself and kind of work out what you think it means, but there has never been any proof that John ever did essay Katherine's daughter at all either. So it's all said to be completely false claims by Katherine. Furthermore, police found a knife sharpener in the living room nearby John's body and another sharpening stone in the kitchen, which they stated had clearly been used. Of course, Katherine was arrested straight away as she was literally there at the scene itself still. Since being arrested, Katherine claims she has absolutely no recollection of the crime, but she was still able to give full details of the medications she'd taken and the quantity of those medications, so I don't know. Katherine claims that her memory just suddenly ends right before she killed John, and began again just as she was finishing skinning, dismembering, and cooking him. Which, that's very convenient, isn't it? Since been stated that this isn't a credible pattern for typical amnesia, especially as she was able to completely clean herself up at her own home before walking back to John's home to continue the act of cooking him. I personally do not believe that there was any amnesia involved in this. I think she's just trying to claim that to get away with what she did. Katherine's trial began on the 15th of October 2001. She originally tried to claim that it was manslaughter, but it was quickly proven through evidence that the death of John was completely premeditated, with her even asking at several points for her nephew to steal John's car and also throw acid in John's face, which the nephew obviously didn't do. but it doesn't seem like he reported this either. Maybe that, I don't want to give like excuses, but maybe they thought it was just one of Catherine's angry ramblings again, because it seemed like she liked to do that a lot from this. Also, I didn't know where else to mention this. There's evidence to show that Katherine had actually withdrawn $1,000 from John's bank account using an ATM whilst John was already dead. So he was dead at home, and she went out to an ATM and withdrew $1,000 from his account. I don't know where to put this, but I thought it was relevant to kind of put in somewhere. I guess it kind of shows that she was sane enough at that point to be able to do something like this. If she, went out and was able to function and withdraw money from an ATM, she obviously was in some sort of normal state of mind. I don't want to say normal because a normal person doesn't do something like this, but she was in like a reasonable enough state of mind to be able to go and withdraw money. Katherine did eventually plead guilty to the crime of killing John, but luckily the mitigating factor of pleading guilty didn't change anything, and on the 8th of November 2001, Katherine was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And this lack of parole was provided because Katherine was obviously marked as a very serious offender. She'd, committed a lot of serious offences before and was known to be obviously very violent. Katherine appealed the original sentence, claiming that the mutilation of John's body after his death was not relevant to the seriousness of the crime. They also tried to claim that the court had not taken into account Katherine's mental health when providing the sentencing, and this is because she was diagnosed with suffering from borderline personality disorder, with psychiatrists stating that they believed there was almost no chance that this disorder would ever be cured. They also stated they believed Katherine would be a danger to society if she was allowed to remain free. Records even show that Katherine had been telling several people that she was going to kill John at one point or another for over a year prior to his death, with her brother even reporting that she told him, quote, "I'm going to kill Pricey and I'm going to get away with it. I'll get away with it because I'll make out I'm mad," end quote. So, I don't know about you, but right there is like proof that this amnesia is complete BS. I mean, I feel like you can smell it from a mile out. I don't think anyone really thinks that this amnesia is actual amnesia. It's obvious that it's fake. Like, come on. Luckily, her appeal wasn't successful, with the judge stating that due to Katherine's extensive history of violence, as well as the severity of the case and her lack of remorse, it would not be safe to provide her with anything other than a full life imprisonment. Her papers were also marked with, quote, "Definitely never to be released," which was the first time a woman had ever received this in Australian history. She is still held in prison to this day and is currently aged 68. John was described as a terrific bloke who was down to earth and liked by everyone who knew him. It was said he was likeable, generous, kind, and would always be the first to lend a hand to someone in need. But sadly, a lot of his friends had decided to cut him off during his toxic relationship with Katherine, as they just didn't like her. And that's so sad. I feel like, I don't know, I find it's always so horrible when you hear about these cases of domestic abuse and people just get cut off from family because obviously other people see right through the partners and they know they're horrible. And I know it's frustrating when people, like the people being abused, don't seem to listen. But I feel like the worst thing is to cut these people off and not give them that ability then to be able to escape. And that's when things like this end up happening. And it's really sad. It's really, really sad. But John seemed like he really cared for his kids. Like every single time he didn't escape because he was scared that Katherine would do something to his kids if he did. And it's really sad to hear about. It's so incredibly sad that John wasn't able to receive the support he deserved for the domestic abuse he was experiencing from Katherine. And it's just awful to know that he was even expecting her to take his life. It just shows how awful the abuse must have been for him to get to that point. Yet throughout it all, his children were at the forefront of his mind. He just wanted to keep his children safe and away from being in the firing range of Katherine's anger outbursts. And it's just so sad that he had to lose his life because of Katherine. As always, I just want to say a huge thank you for taking the time to watch my content and learn about these cases. If you're enjoying it so far, I would suggest subscribing to my YouTube, which you can do via the subscribe button below. I would also appreciate it if you could give the video a like to show the algorithm that you enjoy the content. Plus, if you would like to see more, you can see a video on screen right now that I think you might enjoy too. Hopefully, I can see you again very soon with another true crime video, but until then, remember to be kind to yourself and others and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.